Growing up, I was stopped at literally every single airport security for a random security check without fail. People would always find my family and I extremely suspicious. You might be thinking, why? You look like a normalish kid. But let me introduce you to my dad, Father Anthony Messeh. He's an Orthodox priest and would travel everywhere in his long black robe, attracting attention to our family for better or for worse. I grew up as the son of a priest. Look, I know what you're thinking. Another TED Talk about a church scandal. But I thought in the Orthodox Church, it's actually very common for priests to get married and have kids. Additionally, he is actually very well known in our community for his engaging sermons. In the same way how there are expectations for what my dad might have been doing in that airport, there were expectations that I felt growing up as a priest kid. I believed that I needed to present a polished and put together version of myself to everyone I knew. I became so attached to people perceiving me as perfect that I began to mistake the praise of others for my identity, believing that if I didn't maintain this facade of perfection, people wouldn't like me. So I got good grades. I volunteered in the community, and I even served in my church. I became your textbook definition of a good kid. I was the kid that every single mom wanted to date their daughter. Yes, I was that guy. To everyone, I seemed perfect, but deep down, I felt like the furthest thing from it. As I got older, I was not only consumed with how I was being perceived, but how everyone around me was being perceived. Like so many others in my generation, I was constantly playing the comparison game. I began to focus less on just volunteering in my community and serving in my church, and more on gaining friends and followers. Things began to compound, and my desire to be viewed as perfect so desperately caused me to overthink and miss out on many amazing opportunities. I distinctively remember not trying out for the basketball team because I was scared I wouldn't make it. I remember not going to prom because I was scared I would be awkward, I wouldn't fit in. I remember skipping birthday parties, family gatherings, and other major life events because I feared people would see my imperfections. I was so consumed with how others viewed me that I was willing to sacrifice not being there for my friends and my family. The nature of shaping my identity based on my insecurity and the praise of others was firmly founded and never addressed. And then I moved 3 hours away for college, leaving behind everything I knew and everyone who validated me. All of a sudden, the once constant source of my identity was gone, and needless to say, I did not handle this well. I began to overthink every conversation, believing that if I wasn't perfect, people wouldn't like me. Although I was still volunteering in the community and serving in my church, I wasn't receiving the praise I was used to. This caused me to isolate myself and spend hours alone in my dorm room. I was so consumed with what other people thought of me that opportunities to connect with my peers were slipping through my fingertips because I couldn't escape the trap of perfectionism. I was consumed with insecurity and fear. I remember a friend inviting me to a campus meeting, to a club meeting on campus, and me telling him that I couldn't come because I was sick, when in fact the only reason I couldn't go was because I feared being rejected if I went. Let's pause. I'm on a stage talking about the pursuit of the common good. What does this guy know about the pursuit of the common good? Let's be honest. He's extremely insecure, constantly comparing himself to others, and just wanting you to praise him. How the heck am I on this stage? You know what? I have a great idea for this guy. Send him to a foreign country where he does not know the language, and he's responsible for teaching over 200 orphan children English. Well, in July of 2024, I went on a 3-week immersive service trip to Egypt with 49 other fellows from all over the world. The trip began with an orientation in the United States. Meeting the other fellows was extremely intimidating for me. Some were top academic achievers, others were college athletes, and others were just highly talented individuals, and I was none of those things. Additionally, everyone there could speak Arabic except me. I felt out of place, and I felt like I didn't belong. I believed that I needed to be considered the best in order to be accepted or liked, and in a room full of people who by all my standards were much better than me, I couldn't help but be overly reserved during this orientation. Once we arrived in Egypt, we were split up into groups, and my group was stationed to a rural village in Sohag, Upper Egypt. Conditions were not great to say the least. There was no AC, no internet, and it was common for us to spot a cockroach in our food. Yes, I said a cockroach. Additionally, it was approximately 1 billion degrees everywhere we went. And it was hotter inside than outside. I don't know how it's possible. And it was as far removed from my comfort zone as one could imagine. After a long day of service, extremely hot, tired, thirsty, and crammed into a microbus for hours, we had to make an unexpected pit stop. During this pit stop, a group mate and I started chatting, and things got surprisingly deep, but what else were we going to do? We started chatting about our insecurities, and of course, at this age, I'd become a little aware of my insecurities, but the surprisingly pervasive extent of my insecurities shocked me. I realized that I was allowing my insecurities to govern my self-image and the actions I took in my everyday life. My unhealthy obsession with what other people thought of me caused me to overthink and turn things into a much bigger deal in my mind than in reality. They then encouraged me not to focus so much on receiving validation, but rather giving validation to others. After this realization, everything clicked. Although I still felt extremely unqualified and conditions were still not great, I was now not focused on receiving praise from others, but rather how I could serve, even if it was small. Long story short, this trip became the best 3 weeks of my life, where I experienced life at its fullest. The relationships that I built the most meaningful relationships of my life with my group mates and the children I was serving. I always tell people that after the trip, I truly gained 6 sisters and 1 brother. And although we're all over the world, we still keep in touch to this day. What made the relationships with my group mates so special was that they did not see me as perfect. They saw me as Michael. By being vulnerable and embracing who I was able to foster deeper and more meaningful relationships. Looking back, what made this trip so special was that for the first time, I wasn't focused on what other people thought of me. I was just focused on how I could serve. Since I've come back, my parents, my friends, and even my professors have all told me that they've seen an enormous change in me. I helped found the first ever Orthodox club on campus, became much more confident, and expanded my network. These changes couldn't have happened without the trip. Ironically, the key to me making friends was focusing less on what other people thought of me. For the majority of my life, the fear of not being good enough has caused me to miss out on many amazing opportunities. Egypt was the first time where I wasn't focused on receiving praise, and it was the best decision that I ever made. The contrasting struggle of praise and insecurity was solved with one thing: humility. C.S. Lewis defines humility as not thinking less of yourself, but rather thinking of yourself less. When I was in Egypt, I was only focused on how I could serve my group mates and the children. When I got back, I realized that in order to live a life of significance and make a difference in this world, I needed to focus less on receiving praise and more on just being myself. By being vulnerable and embracing who I was able to create deep connections and make a difference. I learned that success does not require perfection. It requires humility. By focusing less on myself and more on the world around me, I was able to unlock a deeper sense of purpose and connection. So I leave you with one question. What would your life look like if you stopped focusing on trying to be perfect and started focusing on the people around you? I promise you it's worth finding out. Thank you.